We are Team Miru, and I am Jo Yong-won, and I am the producer of this team. And this is Kyung-Lee as lead designer, and this is Chan Yong-hwan as technical director. First, let me explain how our game design has been changed. Previously, there was a shop level in our game, but there is for the players buying items or selecting levels. However, unlike other DigiPen games, we realized that level selecting is kind of meaningless, and buying item is not interesting for the players. So we got rid of the shop level and we changed to a random upgrade system. Next, the difficulty. Before the playtest, we thought our game would be like casual game like Mario. However, in the open playtest, we found out that most of the players are struggling to clear a level like Dark Souls. Therefore, we tried our best to adjust the difficulty without hurting the game design. Summing up, our goal of the beta were applying feedbacks and made on random upgrade systems, and we tried to add cutscenes and applying boss AI, which we couldn't achieve. Now, let's review the playtest result. The red bar is the result from the open playtest, and blue bar is from the closed playtest we done in the international lounge. First, this is the result for the player visibility. It was not bad at the open playtest, but we done some minor tweaks to make it better. And second, some of the players said it was hard to see UI, so we changed the size and position and way it displaying, like horizontal to vertically. It definitely makes clear to see it. And third, difficulty is the major interest for us. You can see the huge red bar in the hard and too hard section, but as you can see from at the closed playtest, there are nice slope starting from the appropriate. Now let's see how the feedback actually changed our game.
So let's start with the tutorial. Refer to the popular games like Witcher 3 or not Skyrim, but in Witcher 3, the player has to do certain actions for a certain amount of time. For example, the attack and the move tile. And only if the player achieves these 4 actions, the player are allowed to continue. It's not the previous tutorial, but I think it does the job pretty well done, because in the closed playtest, we didn't got any person who are asking, hey, what this key does, or hey, well, how can I move or attack? So this is the random upgrade system we were talking about. As you can see, we have about around 10 upgrades in our game, but only 3 of them will appear in the upgrade system before each level. There are some upgrades that appear constantly, but there are some upgrades that are not going to be updated, like new skills. In this case, let's select the third one. So, interestingly, many people said our game feels like a strategy game, because the player has to think about their move before they actually play. Therefore, we added a pause before each level so that the player can rethink about their strategy before getting to the action. Whenever the player dies, the player will see this familiar "you die" screen. As you can notice, there is no back to the shop button, because our game is now linear. The player has to go through the levels, and whenever the player reaches the maximum level, they win the game. Just a small tip from here. The player can restart anytime they want. So in the playtest, we saw many people waiting for the death screen, but they don't have to. They can just press Y whenever they want if they think they messed up the level. So, as I said, there's an upgrade system. Let me tell about the first upgrade. There are some upgrades that are really only have positive effects, like a health upgrade or energy upgrade. But there are things that are kind of risky and change the game, how the game plays drastically. For example, the first one, it increases the basic player dash distance. In most games, this is good because the dash distance means how the player can move in 1 second, how fast can he. However, in our game, because the player moves tire-based, it can be good if used properly, but it might not be good because it can be confusing. In this case, let's choose the second one. So the huge, big, square-looking enemy, that's the new type of enemy that we added. Based on the player feedback, many players said there are too many enemies to consider at one time, like 4 enemy turrets and 3 enemy chasers. Therefore, we added this enemy. It resembles like an enemy chaser, but it is different because it moves really slowly and only for a short distance, and it pauses after it moves. And so the player can just ignore while playing this game and clear the rest of the enemies and then clear this enemy. This is, yeah. And we added some cute enemy chaser. Yeah, that's this is all for the demonstration. Now, Chani will explain what's our next goal.
In short, our game is feature completed. The player can clear the stage while avoiding and killing the enemies, and also can upgrade after clearing the stage. Since the functional part of our game has been completed, so we concentrated on changing code that is invisible to players while maintaining the stable build. For example, we will change the upgrade system with the linked wrist we recently run, and we will make the cheat code after consulting with the instructor, because we already have some cheat code, but there may be more other cheat codes that we need to add. So this is our presentation, and thank you for watching our presentation. If you have questions, feel free to ask.
That white monster you had
Yeah.
that moves slowly. If player touches him, like, does it attack you?
Yeah, all melee enemies will attack whenever it touches, like the maple story, you know.
Yeah.
Whenever the player kind of collide with the enemy, it will attack.
Actually, it hurts, but I used the invincible mode at the
Yeah.
demonstration, so
You can see the green square around the player is the invincible. You can upgrade in the upgrade system if you select wisely.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Any feedback?
Was that a question?
Oh.
I was curious about the dash is really can avoid enemy or just
It can avoid enemies if you don't collide with them. But if you can upgrade a dash invincible time in the upgrade system, then you have a short period of time where invincible. Whenever you start the dash, then you go for
because I didn't know that I can really
you. Yeah, only if you upgrade.
Okay. How many levels do you have or plan to have? By
We have for 3 in the beta, but we plan to have over 5 because each playthrough should not take long enough. There are upgrades.
So how? So right now are the what makes the levels different? Is it the enemies or
The
also
enemy
the layout?
types and the enemy position, because mainly it's the enemy type and the number of enemies.
Okay, so technically then it's not creating new levels.
Yeah,
it's
it's
really
not.
about the number of enemies.
Yeah, that's why we don't want to add a lot of levels. There might be some tweaks we can do, like as I said, covering the portion of the screen with the map with the ceiling, but we did not think it's a good idea.
How about levels, later levels where you defeat enemies, but new waves of enemies show up and you continue fighting? Just curious.
I think that we already tried the method while making the boss AI, and there's a kind of 3 waves, and there's a boss AI. So I think we can definitely make the wave system more
Okay.
concrete.
So right now you demonstrated the pistol. I know in the past you wanted different weapons.
About the hammer. We had the hammer in the open play test, and we were quite surprised that because no one liked the hammer. They all wanted to use the pistol because it felt so good, and we reduced the enemy health, so the player kinda feels like they are powerful but weak at the same time because they have only 1 health, 2 health, but the enemy kinda dies in 1 hit, so they feel powerful. So they kind of didn't want it to use the hammer.
Okay, so the pistol then is the only weapon?
Yeah. for now.
Okay. Okay, so with the spawning potentially, usually if you do a system where, since it's such a small confined space, spawning, you would usually want to make sure that the player gets some warning that enemies are about to spawn, and usually like warnings of where the enemy will spawn. So it's kind of like
Like a
it doesn't. I don't know how you want to do it.
the position of the
Yeah, but you kind of want to. The player should know kind of roughly where the enemies will spawn. And besides just saying warning, the enemy's coming, right? Because it's such a small amount of space, you don't want to happen where an enemy spawns as the player around where the player is. That could potentially just kill them. And you can also make it a little bit.
I think we can do the random. We were trying random roguelike, not roguelike, but random positioning.
Yeah, you can do
because
random
we are
positioning.
getting tired.
You can also check where the player is and start from there so that you make sure you don't spawn at the player. But of course, if they move after, it's probably their fault. But like something where it gives them like an idea of enemies are about to spawn, where they're about to spawn, and get ready. Okay, so you can continue on the level. Now this was interesting because I'm watching your upgrade system, and you said dash was a choice that may or may not be useful.
Dash distance.
Yeah, dash distance.
Yeah, it really is because we saw
So-
the latest.
When you created these items, did you create categories or types that these items
Yeah,
represent?
we don't have the exact category if you are saying about that. But we kind of thought about the category. So if you have noticed, there's a category based on the color. If that's the green, it means it's related to dash, and it's kind of, if it's red and it's related to health. So that's it.
Okay. Well, I mean that's color coded for those things.
Yeah, so we kind of made to adjust the number based on the color.
Okay.
So there are not too many health upgrades, but too small. If you are saying about that.
Just curious about the idea of adding items that may not be considered upgrades, but more game dynamic changing items. So you got rid of the hammer, so that was going to be one example, but the dashing distance is another example, where it's a choice the player makes that actually changes how the game plays for them. So switching from a pistol to a hammer, so that means you have this new weapon, you don't use the old one anymore, or dashing gets significantly changed on how it behaves. Maybe one of the things for dashing now, this is just an example, but changes the gameplay drastically, even though it's a small change. So, for example, maybe dashing becomes a attack, but you lose your other weapons. So you dash to kill, but now your cooldown for the dash is longer. So now it's like you use one step tiles and then dash to kill and then try to run away.
So you want more items that actually change the gameplay, right?
It's just a thought, right?
Yeah,
Because
okay.
that's why I asked how many levels do you have,
Yeah, okay.
right? If you don't have that many levels, how do you increase replayability? So this way, your game, you can make a small change, it's sort of a small change, but it changes how the game behaves for the player. So if you had the hammer, for example, then it would have been, okay, you lost your pistol, but you have a hammer, then that's your main attack now. While everything else stays the same, right? The dashing and everything can stay the same, but you're switching out a component that can change how the game feels and plays.
I think losing the weapon is actually a great idea. We didn't thought about it. We just thought about, hey, we can add new weapon, or we can change switch. But I think change the weapon like downwell. Did you play downwell?
Which game?
Downwell. The
Downwell?
player goes down.
No.
Yeah, it's the game. But in that case, the player have to switch the weapon constantly. So but they cannot use the previous one. So I think that's a really good idea.
But it's just a thought because, again, you have a small amount of levels, trying to think about replayability. It does seem like it's good, but I think after someone beats your game 3 times, it's kind of like, okay, I mean, that was fun, but the same now, over and over. So, again, these small tweaks that can really change the gameplay for them. But, of course, you have to worry about the time that you have left. Okay, so think about something small you can change, but drastically change how it works. And the idea was switching how to attack as options. So the players can choose like pistol or hammer or dash attack or whatever we come up with that changes just how the game reacts or the game dynamics. Okay, does that make sense?
Just
About like you said that do they have any more levels? I think like because you have only like 2 health, maybe like you can set like how difficult it is. So like you make easy mode, normal mode, hard mode because you said it's kind of like
we thought
Dark
about that,
Soul.
but the reason why we didn't add that is because the player can choose the difficulty based on the upgrade. For example, there's an upgrade that reduces your health but increase your energy by 2. If you choose that, it would be way more fast because the player can dash constantly, but they have only 1 health. So that was the reason why we didn't have that kind of.
You said you change the operating system so you can access only the shell after the clear the state.
Yeah.
If when player doesn't choose the other upgrade or the
Yeah,
the
it
upgrade,
keeps stacking